Dad perfect revents. My son's new fiancée sat at Sunday lunch and brazenly demanded $500,000 for her dream luxury wedding. She thought I'd just hand it over like any comfortable dad. Then my son slipped me a note under the table. "Dad, she's a scammer. Help." I smiled calmly and said just 2 words that instantly shattered her smug mask and turned her confidence to dust. My name is Harold George Mitchell. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent the last 3 years in what most people would call a comfortable retirement here in Dallas, Texas. Before that, I was a federal judge for 25 years, presiding over financial crimes and fraud cases. I thought I'd seen every con imaginable. Turns out the most dangerous ones don't come from strangers in courtrooms. They come to Sunday dinner wearing a designer dress and a practiced smile. That particular Sunday started like any other. Timothy, my son, had invited me to lunch at the French Room in the Adolphus Hotel. He'd been dating Sophia for about 8 months, and I'll admit I hadn't paid as much attention as I should have. Timothy is 35, a successful project manager at a tech company, and he'd always been careful about relationships. Too careful, maybe. When he finally introduced me to Sophia 3 months ago, I was just happy to see him happy. She was striking, I'll give her that. Long dark hair, perfect posture, the kind of woman who knows exactly how good she looks and exactly how to use it. Her mother, Carmen, joined us for lunch occasionally, a woman in her late 50s with the same calculating eyes as her daughter, though she tried harder to hide it behind a veneer of Southern charm. That Sunday, both women were at the table when I arrived. Timothy looked tense. I noticed it immediately, the way he kept adjusting his napkin, the forced quality of his smile, but I chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. They'd gotten engaged 2 weeks earlier. "Harold," Sophia said, leaning forward with that brilliant smile. "I'm so glad you could make it. We have some exciting news about the wedding to share." I ordered my usual scotch and settled in, expecting to hear about a venue booking or a date. Instead, Sophia pulled out a leather portfolio and placed it on the table between us. "Timothy and I have been planning our dream wedding," she began, her voice taking on a business-like quality that made something in my gut tighten. "And we wanted to discuss the budget with you." Budget. Not plans, not ideas. Budget. "We've worked with a top wedding planner," she continued, opening the portfolio to reveal page after page of glossy photos and typed estimates. "And we've determined that for the wedding we envision, we'll need $500,000. The scotch arrived. I took a slow sip, watching her face. Timothy's hand was white-knuckled around his water glass. $500,000, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "That's quite specific." "Oh, it breaks down very precisely," Sophia said, warming to her subject. Her eyes had a gleam I'd seen before, in my courtroom, when a witness thought they had the perfect story rehearsed. $200,000 for the venue alone. We're looking at the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek for 300 guests. Then $100,000 for the floral arrangements and decor. I've always dreamed of having cherry blossoms flown in from Japan, and the ice sculptures alone will be $25,000. $50,000 for my dress, she interrupted herself, touching her collarbone in what I'm sure she thought was a demure gesture. Vera Wang is designing it personally. It's a once-in-a-lifetime piece. Carmen chimed in then, her voice syrupy. "Our family has certain standards, Harold. Sophia is our only daughter. We want her day to be perfect." I glanced at Timothy. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Our eyes met for just a second. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a scared 10-year-old who'd broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. Pure panic. $500,000, I said again, setting down my glass. "And you're sharing this budget with me because—" Sophia's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Well, traditionally, the groom's family contributes significantly to the wedding expenses, and Timothy mentioned that you're comfortable. Comfortable. What a delicate way to assess someone's bank account over lunch." "I see." I picked up the menu, scanning it as if this were any normal Sunday. "And have you considered what Timothy thinks about this budget?" "Timothy wants me to be happy," Sophia said, her hand sliding over to cover his. He didn't return the gesture. "Don't you, honey?" Timothy opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. We've discussed that this is important to me." "We've discussed that this is important to me," Sophia cut him off smoothly. That if his family truly cares about him, they'll want to see him start his marriage properly. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Support this, or you don't support your son. I was about to respond when I felt something brush against my knee under the table. Timothy's hand passing me something. I palmed it smoothly, a skill I'd learned from watching defendants do the same thing in my courtroom for nearly 3 decades. Carmen was watching me carefully now. "Harold, you seem hesitant. Is there a problem?" "Just digesting the information," I said mildly. "It's a lot to take in over lunch." Sophia leaned back, and I caught the change in her demeanor. The sweetness was evaporating. "I would think that for your only son's wedding, no expense would be too great, but perhaps I'm mistaken about the kind of family Timothy comes from." There it was, the manipulation. Attack the family bond. Make it about love and loyalty, instead of the absurd amount of money being demanded. Under the table, I unfolded the paper Timothy had passed me. Without looking down, I ran my thumb across it, feeling the indentations of pen strokes. Whatever he'd written, he'd pressed hard. The paper was small, maybe torn from a notepad. I kept my eyes on Sophia as she continued talking about vintage champagne and custom invitations, all while my thumb traced the letters Timothy had carved into the note. When I'd felt enough to understand, my blood went cold. But I've learned something in 25 years on the federal bench. The moment you show your hand is the moment you lose control of your courtroom. So, I smiled, nodded at appropriate moments, and listened to Sophia's increasingly aggressive pitch while my mind raced through everything Timothy had just told me in 6 words. "Dad, she's a scammer. Please help." I looked at my son. Really looked at him. The circles under his eyes that I'd dismissed as work stress. The weight he'd lost. The way he kept checking his phone with an expression close to dread whenever Sophia wasn't watching. How had I missed this? But I knew how. I'd been alone since Timothy's mother passed 8 years ago, and I'd thrown myself into judicial work to avoid the silence of the house. When I retired, I'd filled the void with my hobby of restoring antique legal texts and the occasional consulting work. I'd been so pleased that Timothy had finally found someone that I hadn't asked the questions a former federal judge should have asked, like why a 32-year-old woman with no apparent career was living in a luxury apartment in Uptown, or why every conversation seemed to circle back to money and status, or why Timothy's friend circle had mysteriously shrunk since he'd started dating her. "You're awfully quiet, Harold," Carmen observed, her tone sharp despite the smile. I shifted my attention to her. Another detail I'd overlooked, the way she choreographed these interactions, always present, always managing the conversation. This wasn't a daughter asking her mother for support. This was a team operation. "Just thinking," I said pleasantly. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Thinking about what? Whether your son is worth $500,000? There was the real her flashing through the mask, the anger when someone didn't immediately capitulate. I'd seen this before in my courtroom, different context, different setting, but the same pattern, the escalating demands, the emotional manipulation, the way she was already preparing the narrative that, if I said no, I was the villain in Timothy's love story. Years ago, I'd presided over a case involving a woman who'd convinced 3 different men to invest their life savings in a luxury spa that never materialized. She'd used the same tactics: create the dream, make it seem essential, attack anyone who questioned it, isolate the victim from their support system. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "about the details." "What details?" Sophia's voice had an edge now. "All of them." I picked up my scotch again, took another sip. $500,000 is a significant sum. I assume you have detailed contracts from all these vendors, signed agreements, proof of the quoted prices. The silence at the table was sudden and complete. Carmen recovered first. "Well, naturally, we're still in the planning stages." "So, you're asking for $500,000 based on estimates." I kept my tone conversational. "No contracts, no guarantees, just ideas?" Sophia's cheeks flushed. "It's not about the paperwork, Harold. It's about trust. It's about family." "Actually," I said, "when someone asks me for $500,000, it's absolutely about the paperwork." I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out which approach would work. The sweet fiancé had failed. The righteous daughter hadn't worked. Now she was moving towards something else. Maybe this was a mistake, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. Maybe Timothy and I should just elope, save everyone the trouble. Timothy's hand jerked toward her, then stopped. I saw the conflict on his face, the desperate desire to fix this, to make everyone happy, even as he'd literally just told me she was scamming him. This was it, the moment where I could let this play out, watch my son make a catastrophic mistake, or I could do what I'd done for 25 years on the bench, cut through the lies and force the truth into the light. I smiled. It was the smile I used to give defense attorneys who thought they were clever right before I ruled against their motions. Prove it, I said. Sophia blinked. What? Prove it. Prove that this wedding actually costs $500,000. Show me the detailed estimates from real vendors with real company names and tax IDs. Show me signed proposals. Show me anything that demonstrates this isn't just a number you pulled out of thin air. Her mouth opened, closed. Carmen's eyes had gone hard. You have 72 hours, I continued, pulling out my phone and making a show of setting a reminder. 3 days to provide documentation for every single dollar you're requesting. If this wedding truly costs $500,000, proving it should be simple. This is insulting, Carmen hissed. This is due diligence, I corrected. Something I should have done months ago. I stood up, dropped $200 on the table for lunch, and looked at Timothy. Son, I need to speak with you privately. Sophia grabbed his arm. Timothy, you don't have to. Yes, I said quietly. He does. Because this is my son, and I will not watch him be manipulated. Not anymore. The look Sophia gave me then was pure hatred. And in that moment, I knew Timothy's note was absolutely right. This woman was a scammer, and she just realized that her Mark's father wasn't going to be as easy to handle as his lovesick son. I walked out of that restaurant with Timothy behind me, and for the first time in 3 years of retirement, I felt the old fire burning again. The thrill of the pursuit, the search for truth. Someone had tried to con my son. They'd picked the wrong family. Timothy sat in my study for 2 hours that evening, and I watched my son unravel the story of the past 8 months like he was pulling apart a badly stitched seam. It started so perfectly, he said, staring at his hands. We met at a charity gala. She seemed different, intelligent, cultured, interested in meaningful things. She asked about my work, actually listened when I talked about project management strategies. I poured him a whiskey. He needed it. When did the money talk start? I asked. Second date. He laughed bitterly. She asked what neighborhood I lived in, where I grew up, what you did for a living. I thought she was just getting to know me, making conversation. But I knew better. Those weren't conversation starters. Those were asset assessments disguised as small talk. By the third week, she'd mentioned 3 times that her previous boyfriend had been financially irresponsible. Timothy continued. She made it sound like a warning sign she'd learned to watch for. I actually felt proud that I had my finances in order. Classic manipulation. Make the Mark think meeting your standards is an achievement. The friends thing was gradual. He said. Arthur called too much. Dennis was clearly jealous of our relationship. Leonard worked too many hours and was a bad influence on my work-life balance. Before I knew it, the only people I was seeing regularly were Sophia and Carmen. Isolation. I'd seen it in domestic abuse cases, financial exploitation schemes. The pattern was always the same. Timothy, I said, leaning forward, I need you to be completely honest with me. Tell me about every dollar you've given her. Over the next hour, Timothy painted a picture that made my blood pressure climb with each detail. The emergency car repair Sophia needed help with, $12,000 for a BMW she'd crashed while texting. The family medical bills Carmen couldn't quite cover, $8,000 for procedures that I was now certain never happened. The investment opportunity in a friend's boutique, $15,000 into a business that Timothy had never seen proof actually existed, $35,000 in 8 months. And Timothy, desperate to prove himself a worthy partner, had paid every time. The wedding demand was different, though, Timothy said, more aggressive. When I suggested we could have something smaller, she actually threw a glass at the wall, then immediately apologized, cried, said she was just stressed about her mother's expectations. Escalation. They were testing how much they could push him. Timothy, I said, Has Sophia ever asked you to transfer money to specific accounts? Accounts that weren't clearly hers? His face went pale. The boutique investment. She said her friend's business partner handled the financial side, gave me routing and account numbers. How did you know? Because I'd presided over this exact scheme in 2018. Different players, same playbook. The next morning, I called Gregory Allen Cooper, a private investigator who'd worked several cases during my tenure on the bench. When he answered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Gregory, I need background on 2 women. Deep background. Financial? Records, previous relationships, property holdings, the works. This official or personal? He asked. Personal. My son's fiancée and her mother. I think they're running a wedding scam. Gregory whistled low. How personal are we talking? $35,000 personal so far. I need to know if they've done this before. I'll have preliminary results in 5 days. Full report in 2 weeks. 5 days for preliminaries works. I'll send you the details within the hour. While Gregory worked his magic, I focused on building the legal framework. I called Charles William Barnes, an attorney who specialized in family law and financial disputes. I'd known Charles professionally for years. He'd appeared before my bench on several occasions. Charles, I need to hire you. My son's being targeted by what I believe is a wedding scam, and I need someone who can build an airtight case. How airtight are we talking? Charles asked. Airtight enough that if this goes to court, the other side doesn't just lose. They face criminal charges. Charles's fee was $5,000. I wrote the check without hesitation. The 72 hours passed with no documentation from Sophia. Not a single vendor contract, not one signed proposal. Instead, on hour 71, she sent Timothy a text. Spoke with the wedding planner. She said verbal agreements are standard in luxury events. The detailed contracts come after the deposit. You do trust me, don't you? Beautiful. She was creating a narrative where asking for proof became an act of distrust, where due diligence became betrayal. I screenshotted that text. It would be useful later. On the 5th day after lunch, Gregory called. Your instincts were right, he said without preamble. Sofia Elena Martinez, born Sofia Christine Gutierrez, 32 years old. 3 previous engagements in the past 7 years, all in Texas. All ended 2 to 3 weeks before the wedding date. My hand tightened on the phone. Tell me about them. The first one, Houston. The groom's name was Arthur Dean Thompson, tech entrepreneur. Lost $65,000 in wedding deposits. Sophia kept delaying contract reviews, saying her planner worked on trust and relationships. Wedding got called off when he finally demanded to meet the vendors. Sophia said he was controlling and left. Second engagement, Austin. Leonard James Wilson, real estate developer. $72,000, same pattern. Luxury wedding plans, vague documentation, money transferred to various vendors. Engagement ended when he started asking questions. Let me guess, I said. Sophia said he didn't trust her. Almost word for word. The third one's interesting, though. Vincent Paul Rodriguez, San Antonio investment banker. $58,000. He actually hired a lawyer to investigate before the engagement ended. Found out 9 of the 15 vendors on Sophia's list were shell companies. Bank accounts registered to various names, all connected back to Carmen Martinez through shared addresses and phone numbers. Did he prosecute? Wanted to, but his lawyer advised against. Said the case was complex, would take years, and Sophia could claim the relationships with vendors went bad after she'd paid deposits in good faith. Rodriguez decided to cut his losses and move on. So, they'd pulled this at least 3 times that we knew about. Total documented losses, $195,000 plus Timothy's $35,000. These women had refined wedding fraud into an art form. How much of this can you document? I asked. All of it. Bank records, phone logs, property records, the works. I've also got contact information for all 3 previous victims. Whether they'll talk to you is another question. Forward me everything. I'll handle the victims. That afternoon, while Sophia sent Timothy increasingly desperate texts about needing a decision on the venue deposit, I sat in my study and read through Gregory's full preliminary report. It was damning. The next morning, I received an email from Sophia to Timothy, copied to me. The subject line read, "Final wedding budget ready for your review." I opened it. 15 pages of detailed breakdowns, vendor names, service descriptions, and costs totaling $485,000. It looked professional, thorough, legitimate. It was also almost certainly complete fiction. I forwarded it to Gregory. His response came back in under an hour. 8 of these companies don't exist. The others are real businesses, but when I called pretending to be a groom checking references, none of them have contracts or even conversations with anyone named Sophia Martinez. Perfect. The confrontation came exactly 72 hours after my ultimatum. We met at Elite Wedding Designs, the address Sophia provided. The building in the design district was real enough, but Suite 140 had been vacant for 3 months. Someone had taped a temporary Elite Wedding Designs placard to the door. When Sophia and Carmen arrived at exactly 2 p.m., I was waiting with Charles in a briefcase full of evidence. "Where's your wedding coordinator?" I asked as we entered the empty suite. Nothing, but beige carpet, white walls, and a card table with folding chairs. "Michelle must be running late," Sophia said, her voice bright and brittle. "She texted me this morning that she was moving some furniture to her new office space." "Michelle Rodriguez," I said, opening my briefcase. "That would be your wedding coordinator." "Yes, exactly. She's very in demand, books out months in advance." "Interesting, because according to the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry, no business named Elite Wedding Designs exists, and no wedding planner named Michelle Rodriguez is licensed in Dallas County." Sophia's smile froze. Carmen took a half step backward. "Let's talk about your budget," I continued, pulling out Gregory's report. 15 vendors, 8 of them don't exist. The bank accounts you provided route to shell companies registered to various names, all sharing mailing addresses with your mother. I pulled out another document. "Let's talk about Arthur Dean Thompson, Houston Tech. Entrepreneur, lost $65,000 to a wedding that never happened. Ring any bells?" Sophia's pupils dilated. She shot a look at Carmen, who looked like she wanted to bolt. Or Leonard James Wilson, Austin real estate developer, $72,000. Same pattern every time. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sophia said, but her voice had lost all its confidence. 3 previous engagements that ended weeks before the wedding, all with substantial deposits paid and never returned, all with the same pattern of fake vendors and shell companies. I leaned forward. "Sophia, I spent 25 years presiding over financial crimes. This isn't a coincidence. This is a criminal enterprise." Timothy was staring at Sophia like he'd never seen her before, which in a way he hadn't. The mask was cracking. "You can't prove any of this," Carmen said desperately. "I can prove all of it," I said quietly. "Bank records, phone logs, testimony from 3 victims, including documentation of the shell companies." "You're done." I pulled out my phone. "This is the direct line for the assistant district attorney in charge of financial crimes. I worked with him for 15 years, 1 call, and you're both under investigation by morning." "You're bluffing," Carmen said, but her voice shook. "Am I?" I showed them the contact on my screen. Sophia's composure finally shattered. "You bastard," she hissed. "You self-righteous bastard. Your son was nothing special, you know that? Just another mark with a trust fund and daddy issues." "There it is," I said softly. "The truth. Thank you for that." Charles had been recording the whole conversation on his phone. "You can leave now," I said, "or I can make that call. Your choice." They left. Sophia's heels clicked frantically on the tile as they fled. 2 days later, faced with overwhelming evidence including recorded confessions, Sophia pleaded guilty to wire fraud charges and received 12 years in federal prison. Carmen got 15 years due to prior convictions. Timothy learned to trust his instincts again. I learned that retirement doesn't mean the judge ever really stops being a judge. And Sophia Martinez learned that when you demand $500,000 over Sunday lunch, you should make sure there isn't someone at the table who spent 25 years learning to recognize a con when he sees one. Sometimes the best protection you can give your children isn't money. It's teaching them that anyone who truly loves them will never make love conditional on how much they're willing to pay. Trust isn't built through grand gestures and expensive promises. It's earned through consistency, transparency, and respect for the word no, qualities that real love never has to purchase.